Technical difficulties early on this morning, but today was a real opportunity for us to recognize the accomplishments and to recognize the curators that are retiring from the board after 6 years of service. And certainly Chairperson Walker has led the way this year with economic development as a focus, and we started the day with an economic roundtable to talk about that. Marion Cairns and Don Walsworth, the other two curators that are finishing their six-year term. So the last 24 hours we've had a chance to recognize their accomplishments this morning, and we indicated that we had truncated the curators meeting in order to stay very focused on our 4 campuses as well as within the system office of addressing the challenge of the state's budget request to us, which now has a response due by next Thursday. So my comments this morning were directed at the numbers, which certainly indicates were those to come about would require us to be again very careful as we go about the task of identifying where cuts and where changes would occur, so that we can ensure the quality of our mission is protected. And that quality of the mission runs the gamut of students and teachers and faculty, alumni, and all of our supporters across the array of teaching, service, economic development, and research. And that is going to be our top priority, to be sure that our mission and the quality of the delivery of that mission is going to be protected throughout that type of period. With that in mind, though, I think it is an important opportunity for the university to emphasize its role in providing solutions to both the national as well as states' economic issues. And with that, this morning we provided some information about a research project that was just concluded, and coupled with that, the ability for the university to be considered part of the solution for healthcare issues as well as for economic development. There's some real solid information that we now have that will allow us to reinforce those messages as we go about our task of dealing with the budget situation in the state. We made an announcement this morning of the establishing of an Economic and Research Development Council. Again, part and parcel to our role in providing solutions and helping the state to find its way through these issues is that type of a council to emphasize the importance of what we do in that regard. We announced that we'll be having 2 summits next year, one focused on energy and solutions energy that, again, are resident in the research and capabilities at our 4 campuses, and one focused on biological and life sciences. And again, we think that is consistent with the university being viewed as a resource to provide solutions. In addition to that, I provided a draft copy of a letter to our elected officials, our delegation in Washington, to our 2 U.S. senators and congressional representatives, as well as being provided to Governor-elect Nixon, that would indicate that the University of Missouri ought to be, again, part of the economic stimulus package that's put together because of the resources and the investments that we know when dollars are invested in the University of Missouri, there's a 5-to-1 return. And we know that as short-term projects that can be started within the next 90 days, we've identified over 70 projects that fit that category that could be started and, again, could create jobs, provide infrastructure support, and certainly deal with some of the issues that underfunding in our state has produced in the last 8 years, where we haven't kept up with maintenance and repair requirements. So those, I think from my perspective, were points that we made this morning, and while we can't predict whether we would be where national funds would be made available, we want to be sure that as the scope of President-elect Obama's plan is considered, that higher education infrastructure support ought to be considered a great return on investment that the country is going to be making, and the same message should be conveyed to Governor-elect Nixon. So with that, why don't we turn for questions, and certainly the opportunity to introduce in his new role Chairman-elect of the Curators, Beau Frazier, is an opportunity as well.
President Forsey, Ray Williams. I have a question.
Ray, here in the room, we have a question. Go ahead, please.
Adam Ellington from KWMU.
Okay.
I know you don't have to make the recommendation to the state until next week on those budget cut scenarios, but can you give me any idea on what that 15 to 25% cutback would look like for the UM system?
Well, we provided some reference points to that in a email that I sent out this week to all the constituents, all the faculty, staff, and And just the simple math would say that range of cut of a 15% is $65 million on the low end up to $105 million on the high end. And in that email at this point, and even in our response next week, just so you're conditioned for that, we aren't going to be specific beyond allocating what that would mean to the UMSL campus or the UMKC campus or S&T and the Mizzou campuses. We're not going to be specific beyond saying this is what that would mean, and here's the examples of what could occur if that cut were to become reality. So we're not going to, again, except at a very high level, saying this would be the impact in aggregate on employees, if that's where all of that cut were to come from, or on tuition on the other extreme, if that's where all of that revenue source to offset the cuts were to come from. So we won't be providing the final plan. This will be illustrative of the actions that could be required. Again, putting the caveats that we won't know until probably January or early February of exactly what the number is that will come from the state that would suggest what impact will be to the university. And then from that point, we'll have the final work to do to describe exactly what actions will be required. So next week's response will be at a very high level and frankly won't go much beyond what was in my email response this week, just to set expectations.
What was the reasoning for sending that email this week then, if it's not going to go beyond very much when you release your plan next week? What was the impetus then to go ahead and tell people now that this is coming next week?
Well, any time in the time of high angst and the national day-to-day barrage that we get of news and around the state and around the country, I think it is time for those in leadership positions to stand up and communicate, because people otherwise will wonder about the circumstance as opposed to hearing it directly. So we've encouraged not just my communication, but each campus follow that up this week with communication from the campus leaderships. I think it's very important in times of information being provided that they hear directly from those that they look to for direction and leadership. So it was an attempt to acknowledge very clearly that the state has given us an indication of what may be coming and that they should expect our processes to work. I want to be sure that the processes on each campus and that the university staff consider student involvement and faculty involvement, and that process, as many of you know, took place this week with my direct involvement with the Student and Faculty Senate. But we want people to understand that at the end of the day, as they say, there may be tough decisions facing us, and we're going to use our very best judgment and very best balanced approach as we work our way through that. And at the same time, as I said earlier, this is a great time for the university based on the university ought to be considered part of the solution, and therefore emphasizing things that we do well, emphasizing things that are unique to the University of Missouri's land-grant mission. We are the only ones in the state that have that type of capability, and the state ought to rely on us in this time of financial issues to be part of the solution. And that's the emphasis on that positive aspect, while at the same time we go work the questions that have been raised to us.
In the letter you sent at the end where you talked, there was a paragraph at the end about look at the strategic direction plan, and then it had, I believe it had a link to tell people go, find your state legislatures and say something to them about the importance of the university. Is there a plan for a more large scale getting students and faculty and whomever is involved with the university community involved in a more direct approach to discussing, or I don't want to use the word confronting, but getting involved with the state legislature to ask for more funding and appropriations for the university?
Well, this is not a new discussion. This is a 8-year issue that started in the year 2000 as the state had to make tough budget decisions at that point in time, and as a result of that, the state has been inverted relative to state support versus increases in tuition. So this is now 8 years in building, so this is not a new point that unfortunately we have to make about being 47th in per capita funding